Transgender, often shortened as trans, are people whose gender identity is the opposite of their assigned sex, for example, trans men and trans women. It may include people who are not exclusively masculine or feminine, for example, people who are genderqueer or non-binary, including bigender, pangender, gender fluid, or agender. The Caribbean region over the years has become tolerable towards the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community through interventions of several LGBT organizations who continue to change the norms of their respective societies. But in Guyana, statistics reveal that there are close to 100 persons living transgender, either as a transgender male or female. The stigma attached to this lifestyle in some instances has its emotional and social impact. To fully understand some of the challenges these persons face, I decided to have a candid conversation with two openly trans individuals who are currently undergoing their transformations. For the purpose of this feature, the featured individuals will be addressed as the gender they identify with. Alessandra Herman is currently a student of the University of Guyana and also a transgender woman. She explained that at a very young age she identified as a woman, but she is still undergoing her transformation medically.
I did display gender non-conforming behavior as early as 3 or 4 years old. So I was assigned male at birth, however I played with doll, I cross-dressed, I expressed feminine in a feminine way, that is to say. So those behaviors that weren't conforming to the masculine gender, they were early as 3 or 4 years old, but it wasn't until after high school when I started to do research I realized that I was transgender.
Elijah Caesar is a nurse by profession and explained that it is still a struggle for his family to fully understand what it means to be a transgender man, especially in Guyana. Caesar explained that he is unbothered by the rejection of his family.
I have the typical Caribbean parent experience. My family isn't accepting, so I don't really like talk. Like before I spoke about it, but now it's like I think I've exhausted the story. So my family is made up of people I pick and choose, or people that I interact with and I form a bond with. So my family isn't blood.
I learned during my discourse with both Elijah and Alessandra that transgender persons can have their names legally changed by way of deed poll, an option which both of them have taken. However, what cannot change is their assigned sex at birth, and this is so by law.
Being a trans person, I think it starts with citizenship. The fact that I'm a born Guyanese and other LGBTQ people who are Guyanese. To politicians and policymakers, when you're planning policies or designing policies, think of inclusion and citizenship. Design your policies in such a way that it does not discriminate minority, especially LGBTQ people.
I think if we start to educate the younger persons to not be the perpetrators of violence towards persons that are not conforming to the normal heterosexual ways, we would then start this whole new accepting generation or more loving generation where we would have less prevalence of violence towards LGBT persons or anybody rather that is out to the ordinary or isn't perceived normal. Policymakers could then put protective laws in place to safeguard each and every citizen.
The still lingering stigma and discrimination of LGBT persons, especially those living as transgenders, have led many of these individuals seeking asylum in countries such as the United States. Both Alessandra and Elijah had different views on this trend.
Personally for me, I have thought of it, of seeking asylum in the US or the UK, but because I'm a student at the university, I thought that I should finish my degree, maybe leave, do my postgrad studies overseas and then return to Guyana. The reason being, I think, for example, the contact hypothesis, in order to reduce stigma and discrimination, minority people must interact with the majority people in a non-confrontational manner. And if we're all going to leave Guyana, how are we going to address the issue? So I believe in staying here and addressing the issue.
I've thought about the process probably all my life, but having traveled overseas and experiencing their culture, I think Guyana is a very, very beautiful place, and it would mean the world to me if I could just be at peace and access the necessaries right here and dwell in my country. So if government officials and healthcare personnel could start putting things in place to suit all Guyanese and not just the hetero part of our makeup, I think that would be an even better place for all.
Meanwhile, Managing Director of the Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination, Joel Simpson, explained that it is still an ongoing challenge to strike an accord with majority groups who display hate and resistance towards the LGBT community.
So for us, we have to go sector by sector and work with all the various stakeholders, because we also believe that education is the key. We think the root of the stigma, the root of the discrimination and the violence is ignorance. And we find that when we deliver these trainings on gender and sexual diversity, we've seen people move from one stage to another. You see light bulb moments in the training, particularly in our first phase of police training. We trained 153 officers, and we're already starting to see the impact of that when we go into certain police stations where the officers are there that we've trained. But the work is ongoing, and I don't think it will end until every single citizen is educated about gender and sexual diversity.
Javon Vickery, HGP Nightly News.